Jake believed he was building financial security. Every 3 months, dividend payments hit his account like clockwork. A few $100s here, a few thousand there. It felt real, tangible, safe. Meanwhile, Marcus bought a boring S&P 500 index fund. No exciting notifications, no passive income screenshots, no monthly cash flow flexing on social media. Just one simple investment over and over again for 30 years. Now here's the crazy part. At first glance, Jake looked smarter. His portfolio paid him cash constantly. He felt like he was winning. But behind the scenes, taxes were quietly eating his returns every single year. His money wasn't compounding as fast, and the companies paying huge dividends often weren't growing anymore. Marcus, on the other hand, let time and compound growth do the heavy lifting. No emotional dopamine, no fake feeling of early retirement, just raw mathematical wealth creation. And when you finally compare the real numbers after 30 years, one of these strategies absolutely crushes the other. Not by a little, by a life-changing amount. The scary part. Millions of people are chasing dividend income because it feels financially secure, while unknowingly sacrificing massive long-term wealth. So, in this video, I'm going to break down the real math, the hidden tax trap, and the investing strategy that actually builds true financial security. And trust me, what you discover might completely change the way you invest. Forever. Before we start, comment number 1 below if you're watching until the end, because the final comparison will shock most people. So why do dividend stocks feel so safe in the first place? Because they give you something most investments don't. Immediate rewards. Every time a dividend payment lands in your account, your brain gets a small dopamine hit. It feels like progress, like your money is finally working for you. And honestly, that feeling is addictive. You start imagining early retirement, monthly passive income, freedom from your job. That's exactly why dividend investing has exploded all over YouTube and social media. But here's the problem nobody wants to talk about. Getting paid is not the same thing as building wealth. Imagine owning 2 businesses. Business A pays you most of its profits every year because it has very little room left to grow. Business B reinvests almost everything back into expansion, technology, and future growth. Which one becomes larger after 10, 20, or 30 years? That's the hidden difference between many dividend companies and the businesses inside major index funds. A lot of high dividend companies are mature businesses. Slow growing, stable yes, but limited. Meanwhile, index funds automatically keep shifting toward the strongest growing companies in the economy. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon. Businesses that reinvest aggressively and become financial monsters over time. And this is where most investors accidentally sabotage their future. They optimize for income today instead of maximum wealth tomorrow. Because emotionally, cash payments feel powerful. But mathematically, compound growth is usually far more powerful than cash flow in the early and middle stages of investing, especially when you still have decades ahead of you. And once you see the numbers side by side later in this video, you'll understand why so many wealthy investors quietly avoid chasing high dividend yields. But the biggest advantage of index funds isn't just growth, it's efficiency. Because while dividend investors celebrate every payout, many of them ignore what's happening quietly in the background. Taxes. Every dividend payment is a taxable event. That means even if you reinvest every dollar back into the market, part of your money gets removed before it can fully compound. Year after year, decade after decade. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a small hole in the bottom. At first, the leak seems tiny, almost harmless. But over 30 years, that tiny leak can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost wealth. Now compare that to many index fund investors. Most of their gains stay untouched while the investment keeps growing internally. No constant tax drag, no forced payouts, just uninterrupted compounding. And this changes everything because investing isn't only about how much return you make, it's about how much you actually keep. This is why many wealthy people focus less on passive income in the beginning and more on maximizing long-term net worth. They understand something most beginners don't. The early stages of investing are not about extracting cash. They're about building the biggest snowball possible. And the larger that snowball becomes, the easier financial security eventually gets. Ironically, the people chasing dividend income too early are often slowing down the exact wealth creation they're trying to achieve. And in the next section, we're going to run the real numbers side by side, so you can finally see how massive this difference truly becomes over time. So let's finally run the numbers. Jake invests $500 every month into dividend stocks. Marcus invests the same $500 into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. Same starting age, same consistency, same 30-year timeline. The only difference is the strategy. Now let's assume Jake's dividend portfolio grows at an average annual return of 8%, including dividends reinvested. Sounds pretty solid, right? Meanwhile, Marcus earns an average return closer to 10% through the index fund. At first, that 2% difference sounds tiny. Most people hear that and think, who cares? It's only 2%. But this is where people who don't understand compound growth get destroyed financially. After 30 years, Jake ends up with around $745,000. Marcus, over $1.1 million. That's a difference of more than $350,000 from just a small gap in annual returns. And remember, this comparison still ignores the extra taxes many dividend investors pay along the way. Now imagine extending that timeline another 5 or 10 years. The gap becomes absolutely insane. This is why wealthy investors obsess over compounding efficiency, because small advantages repeated for decades to create massive outcomes. The scary part? Many people sacrifice enormous future wealth just to enjoy small dividend payments today. They choose emotional comfort over mathematical reality. And, to be clear, dividend investing itself is not bad. The real mistake is using the wrong strategy at the wrong stage of life. Because, in the next part, we need to answer the most important question of all. When does dividend investing actually make sense for financial security? So when does dividend investing actually make sense? Usually, much later in the journey. Because once you've already built a large portfolio, the goal starts to change. At that stage, you may care less about maximum growth and more about stable cash flow. That's where dividend investing can become powerful. Imagine having $2 or $3 million invested. Suddenly, a 3% or 4% dividend yield could generate enough income to cover a large part of your lifestyle without needing to sell assets. That's completely different from someone in their 20s or 30s trying to build wealth from scratch. And this is the mistake so many beginners make. They copy strategies designed for already wealthy people, while they themselves are still trying to escape the starting line. It's like trying to harvest fruit from a tree that hasn't even fully grown yet. The early game is about accumulation. The later game is about preservation and income, different stages, different strategies. And once you understand that, investing suddenly becomes much simpler. You stop chasing hype, you stop obsessing over tiny dividend payments, and you start focusing on the one thing that truly matters: building enough assets to create real financial security later in life. Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't to feel rich. The goal is to actually become wealthy. And in the final part of this video, I'll show you the simple framework many financially successful people use to balance growth, income, and long-term security without falling into the dividend trap too early. So stay with me, because this next section could completely change the way you build wealth forever. So what's the smarter framework for most people? Simple. Focus aggressively on growth first, then slowly transition toward income later. That's the strategy many financially successful investors quietly follow. In the early years, your biggest advantage is time, not dividend payouts. Every extra dollar you keep invested has the potential to multiply again and again through compound growth. That's why many people build the core of their portfolio around broad index funds during the wealth building phase. Low fees, diversification, long-term exposure to the strongest companies in the economy. Then, as the portfolio becomes larger and retirement gets closer, they gradually shift a portion into dividend-producing assets for stability and cash flow. Growth first, income later. That balance is what creates real financial security, not chasing quick passive income screenshots online. Because social media has fooled a lot of people into thinking investing is supposed to feel exciting every month. But real wealth is often boring. It's consistency, patience, automation, and allowing decades to work in your favor. The people who become financially free usually aren't the loudest investors online. They're the ones quietly stacking assets, while everyone else chases emotional rewards. And honestly, that mindset shift alone separates long-term wealth builders from people who stay financially stuck forever. At the end of the day, dividend stocks and index funds are both tools. The real question is whether you're using the right tool at the right time in your life. Because financial security isn't built from emotions. It's built from strategy, discipline, and time. And maybe that's the biggest lesson in all of this. Financial security is not built from chasing feelings. It's built from understanding how money actually grows. A lot of people spend years trying to look financially successful. Instead of becoming financially strong, they celebrate small dividend payments online. They post screenshots. They talk about passive income. But behind the scenes, many of them are still far away from true financial freedom. Because real wealth is not about receiving a few $100s every month. Real wealth is owning assets powerful enough to give you choices. The choice to stop working if you want. The choice to spend time with your family. The choice to survive economic crashes without panic. And those choices usually come from a very large asset base built patiently over decades, not from emotional investing decisions. That's why understanding the difference between income and wealth is so important. Income can make you feel secure temporarily. Wealth creates actual long-term security. And if you're still early in your investing journey, the smartest thing you can do is focus less on looking rich and more on building a machine that compounds quietly in the background, year after year. Because the truth is brutal. Most people want financial freedom, but very few people are willing to think long-term enough to achieve it. They get distracted, impatient, emotional, and the market punishes emotional investors eventually. But those who stay disciplined, they often wake up one day realizing the small, consistent decisions they made years ago completely changed their lives. That is the real wealth formula. Not hype, not shortcuts, not dopamine, just strategy, patience, and time working together. So if you remember only one thing from this entire video, remember this. The most dangerous financial trap is confusing cash flow with actual wealth, because they are not the same thing. A person receiving $1,000 a month in dividends might feel financially secure, but another person silently building a multi-million-dollar index portfolio could be creating far greater long-term freedom without receiving much cash at all in the beginning. And that difference matters a lot, because the early decades of investing are like planting seeds. You don't dig them up every few weeks to check if they're growing. You protect them, you water them, and you give them enough time to become something powerful. That's exactly how wealth works. The people who win financially are usually the people who stay patient, while everyone else keeps chasing quick emotional rewards. And yes, dividend investing absolutely has a place for retirement, for stability, for income later in life. But for most young and middle-stage investors, the real superpower is maximizing long-term compound growth first. That's the engine that creates the freedom most people dream about. And, ironically, the less exciting your investing strategy feels, the more effective it often becomes over time. Because true financial security rarely looks dramatic while it's being built. It looks repetitive, quiet, even boring sometimes. But one day, those small, consistent investments turn into something massive, and suddenly, the freedom you once dreamed about becomes real. That is why understanding the math behind wealth matters more than following investing trends online. Because emotions can make you feel rich temporarily, but disciplined compounding can change your entire bloodline forever. And maybe that's why so many people never reach true financial security. Not because investing is impossible, but because modern culture trains people to chase short-term feelings instead of long-term outcomes. People want proof immediately, results immediately, income immediately, but wealth doesn't work that way. Real wealth is painfully slow in the beginning. For years, it can feel like nothing is happening. Your portfolio grows little by little. The numbers seem small. Progress feels invisible. And that's exactly the moment when most people quit. They abandon long-term investing to chase faster money, riskier assets, or emotional excitement. But the investors who eventually win understand something powerful. The first decade is often the hardest emotionally, but the most important mathematically. Because once compound growth reaches a certain size, everything starts accelerating. Your investments begin earning more than your yearly contributions. Time starts working harder than you do, and eventually, the snowball becomes almost unstoppable. That's when financial security stops being a dream and starts becoming reality. Not because of one lucky stock, not because of one viral investment trend, but because of years of disciplined decisions repeated consistently. And honestly, this is what separates wealthy families from financially stressed families across generations. One group thinks monthly, the other thinks decades. One group chases income, the other builds ownership. Because ownership of strong assets over long periods of time is what quietly creates freedom. And the people who truly understand that, they stop asking, how can I get rich quickly? And start asking the far more important question, how can I become impossible to break financially 20 years from now? So, after everything we've covered, what's the final answer? Dividend stocks or index funds? Honestly, both can work, but they work best at different stages of life. If your goal right now is building the largest possible financial foundation, maximizing compound growth through broad index funds will usually give you a massive long-term advantage. That's simply what the math shows again and again. Then, later, once your asset base becomes large enough, dividend income can become a powerful tool for stability, lifestyle support, and financial peace of mind. Growth builds the machine. Income maintains the lifestyle. And people who understand that balance are usually the ones who achieve real financial security, not temporary excitement, not fake internet flexing. Real freedom, the freedom to choose how you spend your time, the freedom to stop surviving paycheck to paycheck, the freedom to think long term while everyone else panics short term. Because at the end of the day, wealth is not built in dramatic moments. It's built quietly, one investment at a time, one disciplined decision at a time, one patient year at a time. And if there's one thing I hope you take from this video, it's this. Stop chasing what makes you feel wealthy today and start building what can make you truly financially secure for decades. Because the people who master patience often end up mastering wealth itself. If this video changed the way you think about investing, comment security below. And if you want more videos about wealth, investing, and financial freedom, explained with real math instead of internet hype, subscribe now, because the next video might save you years of financial mistakes. Thanks for watching. Stay disciplined, protect your future, and I'll see you in the next breakdown.